Welcome to Meet the Press Now. We've been listening to President Trump, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Attorney General Bondi speak about their mission to crack down on violent crime in the opening months of the administration. We will be keeping a very close eye on this event and will, of course, bring you back to it if the president takes questions from reporters. It comes as the Justice Department continues to crack down on President Trump's political opponents, indicting New York Attorney General Letitia James last week on a bank fraud charge, just weeks after indicting former FBI Director James Comey for allegedly lying to Congress during testimony 5 years ago. The White House, meanwhile, facing a legal setback today after a federal judge temporarily blocked its effort to lay off thousands of federal employees during the ongoing government shutdown. The judge accusing the Trump administration of taking advantage of the shutdown to make the cuts, which she called illegal. And with that, starting us off, NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins me now with NBC News Justice reporter Reilly. Monica, let me start with you at the White House. Your key takeaways from this event so far that we're monitoring closely to see if he does, in fact, take questions.
Well, look, Kristen, I think this has been a priority for the president and for the Department of Justice all summer long. And this is a White House that is trying to tout what they see as the results of some of these operations that they have had in various cities. Of course, in Washington, D.C., it's a little bit different in terms of how the president was able to take over the police force here for 30 days. But there are still National Guard troops that are deployed in Washington and elsewhere, as we are seeing, of course, these increasing clashes between some of those troops, some federal law enforcement trying to help with immigration enforcement, and all of it happening, Kristen, as this government shutdown barrels on with no end in sight. And all of these federal law enforcement that are currently working are working without pay. The National Guard troops, for instance, starting today are going to be able to be paid as active duty military because the president directed those Defense Department officials to use some already allocated funding from a research pot in that budget to pay them and to pay the military, again, for the unforeseen future, depending on how long this shutdown goes for. But this is clearly a White House and an administration that is trying to say that this is just the beginning. The president indicating that he may want to do this in San Francisco as well, targeting that, saying that may be the next city where there could be this same kind of activity. But as we have seen in some of these other places, there are some court rulings. There has been resistance. There have been local officials who've been opposed to that, and then we have seen this get tied up legally. So that's something that likely could happen again, though we have really seen that go back and forth. But this is an administration that is saying we're just getting started, and they want to continue on this crime crackdown as something that the president says he is going to keep at the top of his list and agenda. Kristen.
And Monica, stand by, because, again, we are watching and waiting to see if President Trump does, in fact, take questions. In fact, he started to answer questions about the fact that they are targeting boats of alleged drug cartels. Let's take a listen.
But we've been trying to do that for years, and so much of the drugs, 25–30%, would come in through the seas. Right now we have, I would say, none coming in through the seas. In fact, I don't know about the fishing industry. If you want to go fishing, a lot of people aren't deciding to even go fishing. We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
What's the next
step? But it never worked. It never worked when you did it in a very politically correct manner.
What's the next step in this war on cartels, and are you considering options? Are you considering strikes on land?
Well, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control. We've had a couple of days where there isn't a boat to be found. And that, I view that as a good thing, not a bad thing. But we had tremendous amounts coming in by boats, by very expensive boats. You know, they have a lot of money, very fast, very expensive boats that were pretty big. And the way you look at it is every boat that we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives. So every time you see a boat and you feel badly, you say, wow, that's rough. It is rough. But if you lose 3 people and save 25,000 people, these are people that are killing our population. Every boat is saving 25,000 lives, and you can see it. The boats get hit, and you see that fentanyl all over the ocean. It's like floating in bags. It's all over the place, and it's a tremendous. We're saving tremendous amounts of lives.
Yeah, on that issue. I know you've talked about. I have a question for you, and then I also have a question for Director Patel. I know you talked about having some distaste for Boston recently. Is this one of the cities that you might be looking into, and can you give us a hint about other cities that you might be?
You're saying for where? For where?
For Boston.
Yeah, well, Boston has a bad mayor who at least is a reasonable IQ person. You know, most of them are low IQ, but and they're so bad. I mean, what's going on in Chicago is just, you'd think the guy would say, hey, look, we have a problem, Mr. President. Could you come in and straighten it out? We could have that done in a month if we had their cooperation. It's going to be done anyway, but we could have it done in a month. Yeah, Boston, she's got 4 areas that are, you know, wrong. And, you know, somebody said, would we think about taking the World Cup away from Boston if they don't straighten it out? And the answer is yes, we have the right to do that with FIFA. So if we think that L.A. is going to be bad, or we think that applies a little bit to the Olympics, too, but we'll talk about FIFA first. You know, FIFA is very hot. If we think there's any reason that, whether it's Boston or anywhere else, that they're not doing their job, we're going to take those World Cup games and move them someplace else.
Thank you. And then, Director Patel, there's been so many conspiracy theories swirling around about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Do you have any updates for us, especially in light of all the online content that everyone's been talking about?
The only thing we deal with at the FBI and the Department of Justice is facts. And we delivered at record speed a manhunt to capture Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin in 33 hours. And if you put that in perspective to Luigi Mangione or the Boston bomber, they took them 5 days and a police officer lost their life in their manhunt. We are running on absolutely every single lead. And the best thing we can do to honor my friend Charlie Kirk's life is to make sure that everyone involved is prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And that's what we're focused on, investigating the facts, not trading in conspiracy theories.
Okay.
Mr. President, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In light of China's export curbs on rare earths, do you view India as a reliable partner going forward? And are you planning to meet Prime Minister Modi in Malaysia? Are you open to talks in terms of...
Yeah, sure. He's a friend of mine. We have a great relationship. He just said that 2 days ago, as you know. We have a great relationship. No, we were not happy with him buying oil from Russia, because that lets Russia continue on with this ridiculous war where they've lost 1.5 million people. By the way, Russia's lost 1.5 million people, soldiers mostly. This is a war that should have never started, but it's a war that Russia should have won in the first week, and they're going into the 4th year. And I want to see it stop. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing. You know, that is relatively easy compared to what we just did over the last week in the Middle East. Middle East was 3,000 years, and we got it done. This is 3 years, and I think we'll get it done. I think that President Putin, I think he wants to get it done. We'll see. There's a great animosity between him and Zelensky. You probably have noticed, right? And it's... I think it's hurting the process. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, thank you. Curious, why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged...
Well, I can't do that, but I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the... they came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And as soon as I heard that, I said, a lot of these countries, they're not the only country, but they're the worst abuser. And they've entered they've allowed thousands and thousands of prisoners, mental institution, people from mental institutions, insane asylums, emptied out into the United States. We're bringing them back. But that's a really bad, and they did it at a level that probably not, many countries have done it, but not like Venezuela. They were down and dirty. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela. And a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea, so you get to see that. But we're going to stop them by land also.
Does the CIA have authority to take out Maduro?
Oh, I don't want to answer a question like that. That's a ridiculous question for me to be given. Not really a ridiculous question, but wouldn't it be a ridiculous question for me to answer? But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, but I think a lot of other countries are feeling heat, too. We're not going to let this country, our country, be ruined because other people want to drop, as you say, their worst. They have given us their worst. They've loaded up our country with prisoners, with mentally ill people that are seriously ill, criminally ill. And we're not going to take it. And so, I mean, it's just one of those things. And I can tell you, We've taken care of the sea. There's nobody, and we're watching. We're watching. And if we see it, we'll save it. Yeah, please.
On the ships, though, sir, there are Republicans and Democrats up on the Hill concerned that in the briefings they've gotten about those attacks, they're not necessarily getting information about who was on them and what exactly was on those ships. Can you ensure that?
But they are given information that they were loaded up with drugs, and that's the thing that matters. When they're loaded up with drugs, they're fair game. And every one of those ships they're not ships, they're boats, they're speedboats. They're extremely fast, record-setting type speedboats. They cost a lot of money, and they have a lot of money because they're drug sellers. But they know one thing, and they all have the same thing in common. There's drug dust. They call it drug dust. They call it fentanyl dust all over the boat after those bombs go off, and you can take along.
Attack them though that they're.
We know before. We know when they go out. We know we have much information about each boat that goes out. Deep, strong information. Yeah, please.
So you're going to have Vladimir Zelensky here this week. What is your message at this stage of the war for him? And shy of tomahawks.
To who is that?
For Zelensky.
Yeah.
And shy of tomahawks for Ukraine. Are you considering other options, and will you speak with Vladimir Putin?
No, we're looking at other options. We are. President Zelensky's coming in. I'm not a fan of the war. I'm not a fan of the way it started. It should have never happened. It wouldn't have started if I were president. The election was rigged. And because of that, we lost a lot of lives have been lost because of that war. Not American lives, but if I can save a lot of lives, that's why I'm in it. I want to save lives. I've had 8 wars. The Prime Minister of Pakistan got up the other day, said so beautifully, says, you saved millions of lives. He told that to a group of people right in this office. He said the president saved millions of lives. And I think what he's referring to is the fact that that would have been with India, a nuclear war. That was getting very close. You know, 7 planes, they don't talk about it, but 7 aircraft were shot down. In fact, we have the new ambassador to India right here. They're well represented. You better represent us, not them, okay? But Sergio's going to do a great job. He's going to do a great job. But, no, we'll be talking about the war with him, and we'll be talking about, I mean, they want to go offensive. I'll make a determination on that, but they would like to go offensive. You know that. And we'll have to make a determination.
Can I follow up with a question? Given you have the FBI Director and Attorney General here today, Jim Jordan has asked Jack Smith to appear in front of the House Judiciary.
You mean deranged, Jack? He's a deranged individual, yeah.
He's asked him to...
Well, they should. I'm surprised it takes so long. You know, we're talking about violent crime. What about the crime against a political opponent? That's what we have to talk about, too.
Jordan would like to understand the full extent to which the Biden-Harris Justice Department weaponized federal law enforcement. What do you think the committee will find out, Mr. Smith?
I think it was the worst weaponization of a political opponent in the history of the world, let alone this country. And I hope that everybody's, you know, they're involved in it. I'm not. I'm the one that had to suffer through it and ultimately win. But what they did was criminal. Deranged Jack Smith, in my opinion, is a criminal. And I noticed his interviewer was, I think that was Weissman. And I hope they're going to look into Weissman, too. Weissman's a bad guy. And he had somebody in Lisa, who was his puppet, worked in the office really as the top person. And I think that she should be looked at very strongly. There was tremendous criminal activity having to do. If we don't have fair elections in this country, we're not going to have a country. And I've said it from the beginning, fair elections and borders. And we need also fair press. Because if you don't have fair press, it's very tough. And we've got the strongest border of anybody. Nobody has a border. We have a border where the numbers just came out again. You saw 0 people came in illegally. Now, we do take people into our country legally, but 0 people. But, you know, you're talking about a different subject. You're talking about political crime. They have committed massive political crime. I hope they're looking at Shifty Schiff. I hope they're looking at all these people. And I'm allowed to find out. I'm allowed to, you know, I'm, in theory, the chief law enforcement officer. But I have a very good, talented group. This is about something else. But I hope they're looking at political crime, because there's never been so much political crime against a political opponent as what I had to go through. They raided my house in Florida. It was an illegal raid. I have a lawsuit that was doing very well. And when I became president, I said, I'm sort of suing myself. I don't know. How do you settle the lawsuit? I'll say, give me X dollars, right? And I don't know what to do with the lawsuit. It's a great lawsuit, and now I won. It sort of looks bad. I'm suing myself, right? So I don't know. But that was a lawsuit that was very strong, very powerful. They raided illegally my house in Florida, Mar-a-Lago. They went through the drawers of my young son. They went through all of the cabinets and drawers of the First Lady. She walked in, she said, wow, what happened? Because she's very meticulous, and this wasn't so meticulous. As she looked into the drawers and she saw everything a mess. It's what they did against a person that just got out of office. And then you look at these corrupt people. You look at Hunter Biden. You look at the signature. As an example, the Euro pen. I just signed so many different things. An admiral, a four-star general. I'm signing them left and right, the commissions. And by the way, I want to compliment John Thune and also Mike, our great speaker. But John Thune, all of a sudden, I'm getting these things by the hundreds. I was getting one every 2 weeks. It would have been 4 years before you got them in more. You would have had some that didn't even get in, all because of Democrat obstruction. So John Thune did a great job. I must have signed 200 into the administration. We're just about caught up. It's amazing. And so compliments to John. He had to do some things that were very tough to do that he didn't want to do, but he was forced to do it by the Democrats. And as far as the shutdown's concerned, this is a Democrat Schumer shutdown. And he's trying to do it to get relevance back into the party because he's a loser. I've known him all his life. He's always been sort of a loser, but an intelligent one. But I think he's losing IQ points with time. I think that happens. I hope it hasn't happened with me. I know if it did, you guys will let me know about it very quickly.
Question on violent crime, sir. Here in D.C., a judge has given the two teenagers that beat up ex-Doge staffer Big Balls probation.
It's incredible.
And no jail time. Is this justice?
Jeanine Pirro is doing a fantastic job, and she is beside herself because you have these radical left judges that they beat the hell out of this guy. And there was many people against this one guy who was really trying to protect his girlfriend. He didn't want his hooded over the door but they really beat him up badly. That just happened, right? Yeah. Wow, that's terrible. I think the judge should be ashamed of himself. That's a big problem. You know, they can do their job and then they go into a court and the people are protected by these, I don't know where they come from. Where do these people come from? Where do the judges come from? I want to compliment on behalf of Pam and Todd and all of us because Kash, I think that Jeanine has done a fantastic job. And the case I heard was like flawless. It's a flawless case. They have them on tape. They have everything. And then a judge gives them a little probation. These are rough guys. And they're young. And if that happens, they're going to grow up. They're going to be real bad. They're going to cause a lot of problems. Yeah, please. Go ahead.
So, Sergio Gore has just gotten back from India. What were the conversations like with Prime Minister Modi and the other?
I think they were great. He reported to me that he's a great man, you know. Modi is a great man. That he loves Trump. Now, I don't know if the word love, I don't want you to take that any different. I don't want to destroy his political career, okay? But you have to understand, I've watched India for years. It's an incredible country. And every single year you'd have a new leader. I mean, some would be in there for a few months. And this was year after year after year. And my friend has been there now for a long time. And he's assured me there will be no oil purchased from Russia. I don't know. Maybe that's a breaking story. Can I say that? Would you say? There will be no oil. He's not buying his oil from Russia. It started. You know, you can't do it immediately. It's a little bit of a process. But the process is going to be over with soon. And all we want from President Putin is stop this. Stop killing Ukrainians and stop killing Russians because he's killing a lot of Russians. Again, it doesn't make him look good. It's a war that he should have won in 1 week, and he's now going into his 4th year. That does not make this big so-called war machine look good. But he could make a settlement. We're willing to settle. I thought we had a deal. The hatred of the two leaders is it's an obstacle. It's an obstacle. There's no question about it. But I thought we had a deal 2 months ago. Who would think I created peace in the Middle East and can't get the two guys to settle? But I think we'll get them. But if India doesn't buy oil, it makes it much easier. And they're not going to buy. They assured me they will. Within a short period of time, they will not be buying oil from Russia. And they'll go back to Russia after the war's over. Jennifer?
On the shutdown, sir, are FBI officials being paid right now? Are all the FBI employees being paid? And are all the...
Well, that's what I understand. I hope so.
Thanks to your great work, Mr. President, the 1811 special agents at the FBI are going to receive their paychecks.
Got a lot of people paid, actually. We got the people that we want paid, okay? And we want the FBI paid, we want the military paid. We got the people that we want paid. And I'll tell you, the Democrats, they don't talk about this. You know, we're getting rid of programs that we didn't like, but that were negotiated in, but we didn't like. We're terminating those programs, and they're going to be terminated on a permanent basis. And it's thousands of people, and it's you know, billions of dollars. We're getting rid of a lot of things that we never wanted because of the fact that they made this stupid move. And they don't want to talk about it. You know, they have their day coming up. I hear very few people are going to be there, by the way. But they have their day coming up, and they want to have their day in the sun. But they should really make a deal. So what we're doing, I mean, they call him Darth Vader, but he's actually a very nice person, Russell Vogt. But Russell Vogt is really terminating tremendous numbers of Democrat projects. There's not only jobs, I mean, the project in Manhattan, the project in New York, it's billions and billions of dollars that Schumer has worked 20 years to get. It's terminated. Tell him it's terminated, Jennifer. All right.
On Hamas, sir, what is your understanding of the pace of returning the deceased hostages? Are you pleased?
Well, they're looking for them. Absolutely. They're looking. So we have the living hostages all back. They returned some more today. It's a gruesome process. I almost hate to talk about it. But they're digging. They're actually digging. There are areas where they're digging and they're finding a lot of bodies. Then they have to separate the bodies. You wouldn't believe this. And some of those bodies have been in there a long time. And some of them are under rubble. They have to remove rubble. But there are graves, and some are in tunnels that died in tunnels that are way down under the earth, and the tunnels are like 3 feet. Can you believe it? 3 feet high. They lived like this for a long period of time. It's a horrible atrocity. At the same time, we, meaning Israel, but I knew everything they were doing pretty much. I knew most of the things they were doing, but they've killed probably 70,000 of these people, Hamas. And I said, it's time now. So we'll see what happens. We'll also see what happens. Your next question is going to be the weapons. We want the weapons to be given up, sacrificed. And they've agreed to do it. Now they have to do it. And if they don't do it, we'll do it.
We had the head of CENTCOM today suggest that Hamas needs to hurry up and disarm and follow your comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
That it was the head of CENTCOM saying that. Is that not a signal to Hamas, to the rest of the world, that at some point the U.S. military may more directly engage?
We won't need the U.S. military.
So then why have
We won't need it.
Why not just
because we're very much involved in it. If we weren't involved, there wouldn't be peace. If we didn't destroy the nuclear capability of Iran, that deal would have never happened for two reasons. The Arab nations would not have felt bold enough to do it because you have a very powerful, at that time, Iran is not powerful anymore, between what Israel and us did, because, you know, the attack was, if you look at it, we helped them very much. They will be the first to tell you, including shooting down thousands of drones that were coming into Israel. You know, we shot them down. We were shooting them down like it was target practice, but we shot down thousands of drones and missiles also going into Israel. But between what we did to Iran that way with the, you know, conventional, we will call it, and what see that beautiful plane, that B-2, I noticed it on the desk. I always thought it was beautiful, but I never understood it. Now I understand it. It took in hundreds of thousands of bombs in the form of two, but hundreds of thousands of pounds of bombs. And every single bomb hit perfectly. Then they sent Tomahawks in. They sent 30 Tomahawks on top of it. And that was totally, you know, CNN said, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as, you know, as Trump said, because I said obliterated. Obliterated is not a strong enough word, actually. And you saw the Atomic Energy Commission came out and said the word obliteration is very, very, think of it. They came in under potential fire. They entered Iran airspace late at night in the dark, no moon. The moon was low for a reason. What time we picked it. Couldn't see anything. And they hit every target, and they weren't hit. Nobody saw that plane. That plane is stealth. Nobody saw it. The problem with that is it may be stealth today, but tomorrow it won't be. And we just ordered about 20 brand new B-2 bombers. It's unbelievable as a weapon. I know Putin, when I was riding with him in Alaska, we passed a lot of them. And he said, that really did the trick. I said, yeah, it did. It's amazing. The flying wing.
But you still foresee no reason for the U.S. military to get involved in Gaza?
No, I don't see that. No, I think we're going to handle it very well. We'll be helping Israel. But we have other countries that are now. You know, we signed, many countries signed. And many of those countries relatively are very strong military powers. And Hamas has no support. See, Hamas had the support of Iran. And now Iran says, don't get us involved. The last time they got them involved didn't work out too well. So they used to have the support of Iran. Today, Iran they're trying to survive. You know, when I heard the reports 2 weeks ago, Iran's looking to build a nuclear weapon, I said, don't worry about it. They got a lot of things they want to do before nuclear weapons. I said, the last thing they want to do is a nuclear weapon. It didn't work out. And if they did a nuclear weapon before they got even close, that site would be attacked and it would be wiped out. Yeah.
Mr. President, you're meeting with President Xi in a few weeks.
Yeah.
If you can't come to an agreement or a deal at that meeting, are we in for a sustained trade war with China?
Well, you're in one now. Look, we have 100% tariff. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be exposed as being a nothing. We would have no defense. You know, they've used tariffs on us, but we've never had anybody sitting in that chair that felt the need to do it. And they've allowed us to be $37 trillion in debt, et cetera, et cetera. Tariffs are a very important tool for our defense, for our national security. If we don't have tariffs, we're not going to have national security. As an example, if you look at Pakistan and Iran, I told them I was in the midst of negotiating a trade deal with Iran, and Pakistan was going to be in line. And because of tariffs, they all want to negotiate much differently. We were making a good deal, and then I heard that they're shooting at each other. And I said during one of my conversations, are you guys going to go to war? 2 nuclear powers we are thinking about. I said, here's the deal. You go to war, I'm going to put a 200% tariff. I'm going to stop you from doing any business in the United States. I said it to both of them. Within 24 hours, the war ended. That would have been a nuclear war. And again, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who was here 2 weeks ago, said that man saved many millions of lives in front of a whole group of people because he thought it was going to be war. But when it came to war or having to pay massive tariffs, the tariffs overrode. That's why it's so important. Not only the money, we're taking in trillions of dollars, not only the money, the power to keep peace, the power to be used for good is enormous. But a lot of people didn't understand tariffs. It's also made us very rich. We have a big case coming up in the Supreme Court, and I will tell you, that's one of the most important cases in the history of our country, because if we don't win that case, we will be a weakened, troubled, financial mess for many, many years to come. I don't even know if survivable is a good term. And if we do, we're going to be the most powerful economic country in the world. And all we're doing is using them as a defense against what took place for many years. China would charge us tariffs. It was incredible, but we weren't allowed to charge. We're allowed to do whatever we want. We just had presidents that didn't want to do it for whatever reason. And it was nothing. But of the 8 wars, I was saying 7, of the 8 wars, I would say tariffs are directly responsible for me ending 6 of them, 5 or 6. Without the tariffs, you have wars raging all over the world. With the tariffs, other than Russia, we have no wars out there. And we've made a lot of good friends, too. Tariffs are so important to our national security. If we don't have tariffs, we don't have national security. Our country would suffer a level that, because they use so strongly on us. As an example, the European Union, They won't take our cars. They won't take our agriculture. They won't take anything, but they send their cars in, Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, by the millions. We don't send any cars. They don't take them. They were tariffing us out. Agricultural products, they don't take our agriculture. They want their farmers to do it. I understand that. But it was very unfair, and they were tariffing our product. They're keeping out by using tariffs. And we didn't use them, but I used them. And now we made one of the great deals with your $650 billion they pay us. And we've evened it out. It's really a good thing to see. And you have to understand, they've all signed. Japan, South Korea. I mean, South Korea, $350 billion up front. Japan, $650 billion. And they've all agreed to it. They're all happy. But before, it was a total ripoff. And if we don't have the use of tariffs, we have no national security. This country will have no financial security, will not have national security. And the people that brought the lawsuit are people that are aligned with foreign nations that are now being treated fairly, as opposed to just ripping us off and ripping us asunder. So, but if we are not allowed to use what other people use against us, there's no defense. It'll be a disaster for America. That's why I think I'm going to go to the Supreme Court to watch it. I've not done that, and I had some pretty big cases. I think it's one of the most important cases ever brought, because we will be defenseless against the world. Okay?
Mr. President, you'll go to the tariff case?
Did you have one? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask you about the Georgia Senate race. I know it's very early, but there's several Republicans in that field that are vying for your endorsement.
A lot of good people in that field.
Yes.
I know all of them, actually. I haven't made a decision on that, but you have some very good people in the Georgia Senate race.
Well, Governor has endorsed.
No, I know. The governor has. He's spoken to me about it a lot. He likes that candidate a lot. And I understand that. I haven't made a decision yet. But I'm following that race very carefully. I think it's very important for Georgia to get a real senator, because the senator they have now is a horrible senator. He allows all the crime, all the borders. You have open borders. I mean, his whole philosophy is a disaster. That's not representative of the people of Georgia. I know the people of Georgia. I won Georgia 3 times, but they say twice. Okay, I won it very big the last time, and I won it big the first time, and I won it big the second time. But we had criminals that didn't allow. I mean, I hope they're going to go into that. I hope they go into the votes which are being stored in Fulton County and take a real look at those votes, okay? Because I won it the second time, too. But I know Georgia very well. I love Georgia. Those people are great, and they deserve a good senator, because the man they have now is a weak, ineffective person. Okay.
Mr. President,
I wonder what you meant. By the way, you won Georgia 3 times.
Yeah, I agree. Do you agree with me?
I do.
He's the media.
For someone that spends a lot of time in Georgia, I believe you won that. Yeah, okay. I really have a question about...
You know, the word believe isn't strong enough, right?
Yeah,
you know.
There you go.
It's true. I know I won, too. We have the great Newt Gingrich. Newt, you agree with us? Good. Otherwise, I'd have him dismissed immediately from the room. You know, his wife, as you know, is becoming an ambassador to a great country, Callista, so congratulations. And we're going to take a picture. And the only reason I'm doing it, he speaks so well of me. He said, I'll go down as the greatest president in history. And then he blew it. He said, I'm not sure if I put him above Washington or Lincoln. So I'm not that happy about that, dude.
I've got a question about the weaponization of the DOJ. The media often says your department is weaponizing the DOJ.
Yeah, that's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Todd, you represented President Trump in probably the greatest weaponization of the DOJ by Alvin Bragg. You know firsthand, if you can describe what you saw under the Biden administration and how they weaponized the DOJ.
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to describe what happened in those last 4 years against President Trump. Alvin Bragg, a local prosecutor, his office staffed by somebody from DOJ. Jack Smith picked as a special counselor, staffs his entire office with DOJ prosecutors. And then there are countless things that happened, all in writing, most of them on the docket, that require no explanation except a complete abomination of the place that the Attorney General and I run now, and Director Patel. So when people talk about this department weaponizing, it's embarrassing. Because there's no scenario in which you can look at what we're doing, restoring justice, doing the right thing in every single case, and say that that's weaponization, and yet remain eerily silent about what happened for the past 3 years. I mean, you read these articles and giggle, because it cannot be true that people really think that what they did to him, not once, not twice, I'm still counting 3, 4 times, but we're the ones that are weaponizing. So this man is not weaponizing the Department of Justice. We're not weaponizing the Department of Justice. It's the opposite. I mean, and also, nobody questions what I'm saying because it's true, because we all lived the past 4 years. So listen.
They never want to bring up the details, but I watch the fake news, and oh, he's weaponized, and he wants to send them to prison. He wants all this. They indicted me like 5 times. I took a mugshot. Who would have thought it turned out to my favor? Because it was a good shot. But I had to take a mugshot. It's right out there on the door. New York Post, front page of every paper in the world. I had a mugshot. They wanted to send me. Nobody says that. They say he's acting very, very tough. He's acting unfair. Let me tell you, if they've been nice to anybody, it's to those criminals, because they are so good having to do with all of the things we're talking about today with violent crime. But if anything, I think this Justice Department has been so respectful of the law, because the other Justice Department, with Rita or Lisa and all of that scum, real scum, what they did to the political opponent of a guy that has a seriously low IQ. Now, in his case, it was low based on his career, but it got real low, okay? It was descending rapidly. But what they did to go after his political opponent is legendary, worse than any third world country, banana republic. And what we're doing is nothing. Are you kidding? Nothing. They write stories. Why aren't they doing this? And we'll leave. I don't have to leave it up to them, but I choose to, at this moment at least. But there's never been anybody treated in the history of politics. You know, they say the 2 worst treated presidents by the media, etc., was that man right there, the late, great Abraham Lincoln, and this guy right there, Andrew Jackson. They say Andrew Jackson was treated terribly. They give him number 1 and number 2, but that was before I came along, Newt. I say I have number 1 times 10. Nobody's been treated like I've been treated. And I did a great job. You know, we had a great first term. And we had one of the most successful economies in history, et cetera. I rebuilt the military. We did a tremendous amount. The last part, we had a horrible thing called COVID, and we handled that well. We made ventilators for nations all over the world. I mean, we did a great job. Probably never get credit for it. Look at the therapeutics, the Regeneron, all the different things, the vaccines, all the things we did. We did a great job, but we had to focus on that. But we had the best economy in the history of our country. We're blowing it away right now. Look at the stock market. It hit another all-time high today. That's 48 days out of the few days that I've served. 48 days have already hit record highs. And we have, maybe most importantly, the number we have now, I was saying 17, it's over $18 trillion is being poured into our country. It's because of the election and because of tariffs. Without the tariffs, you wouldn't have probably 18 cents. It's because of the tariffs, because there are no tariffs if they build in our country. And they understand that. So we have medical companies coming over. We have the AI. We're dominating China in AI. Everybody said that's impossible. We're dominating. I'm letting these massive plants build their own electric generating plants. They're becoming utilities in addition to everything. Maybe they'll make more money with that. Who knows? But they're building their own electric because we have an old grid. You wouldn't be able to do that. And we're dominating China. We're dominating with AI, which seems to be the new big thing. That's the new internet. That's the new whatever. So we're very happy with the job we're doing. I'm very happy with the job they're doing. But when you tell me about attacking a political opponent, there's never been. And I'm a legitimate opponent. I watch my son. He's got the #1 best-selling book now. My son, Eric, is a wonderful kid. That guy spent so much time with subpoenas. He got more subpoenas than anybody in the history of our country. Think of it. And he's an innocent, good boy. He's a good kid. He's always been a good kid. All of my children are good. They went through hell. My children went through federal grand juries on a hoax. Think of it. You have Adam Schiff and Hillary Clinton and others make up a hoax and then wanting to put, so they know it's a hoax, and they go before the press, say Donald Trump Jr. will go to jail because of what he's done with Russia. I'll never forget, I get a call from my son, Don, and he said, Dad, I'm being accused of something with Russia. I don't know anything about Russia. He didn't know anything about it. Think of it, how bad they are. They say he'll go to prison for the rest of his life. He knew nothing about it. On a hoax, the Russian hoax, Russia hoax, on a story that they made up. And they made it up in order to explain why Hillary Clinton lost an election that she lost by pretty good numbers. The second one, actually the second one was even better, but the third one, this one was too big to rig. It was just too big to rig. They would have rigged it. They tried to rig it. But think of it. They want to send my children to jail, but they were after Don in particular. I'll never forget Adam Shifty Schiff, a total crooked guy, lying in Congress, making up a phone conversation that I have with you, totally made up. Then when he heard it was taped, he wanted to disappear. And Nancy Pelosi went crazy because they wanted to impeach me based on the conversation that was made up. When they heard the tape, everybody, you know, I won it unanimously in the Republican Party. I got every single vote, something that never happens, and I beat it. But think of it, they want to put my son in jail for something that they made up. So they know they made it up. And they say he will serve the rest of his life in prison. These are sick, bad people. And don't tell me about us going after them. If anything, we've been very, very soft. I wouldn't be that soft, I'll tell you that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Let's go. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Let's go.
You have been listening to President Trump, flanked by officials at the DOJ, his attorney general, his FBI director, answering a range of questions for about 40 minutes now. The event aimed at defending his administration's policy as it relates to sending the National Guard into various cities. I'm going to tick through some of the headlines here, and then we will go to our reporters who've been watching along with us. The press availability opened with the president saying, yes, he was open to potentially taking the World Cup away from Boston if Boston did not cooperate with their law enforcement efforts. Again, really digging in on his insistence that deploying the National Guard to these various cities has been an effective measure, making a fair amount of news as it relates to foreign policy on Venezuela. Of course, there have been those attacks against what the administration has called these drug boats. President Trump signaling he's prepared to expand that offensives. A reporter asking, are you considering strikes on land? The president saying, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control, and also appearing to confirm that he had, in fact, authorized the CIA to operate inside Venezuela. President Trump also making news on India, saying he's spoken to the Prime Minister Modi, who has, quote, assured me today that he won't buy oil from Russia. The president going on to say, now we got to get China to stop. Also saying he is preparing for his meeting on Friday with Ukraine's President Zelensky, and saying of Putin, I think he really wants to get a deal done. Also asked about his tariff policy. The president saying that you're in one now as it relates to a trade war with China, and drilling down and saying that his tariffs are a part of his national security policy. If we don't have tariffs, we don't have national security, the president saying. And then ending with a very long riff about Jack Smith, the special counsel who, of course, indicted him of various charges. Those were dropped once he won the presidency, taking all sorts of shots, not just at Jack Smith, but at the Justice Department under the Biden administration, saying that his DOJ is not weaponized, but that Biden's DOJ was not weaponized. Ryan, Reilly, I want to start with you on that point, because there was a lot that we just heard there coming from the Oval Office. What do people need to know? And it's notable he was talking about calling for his political enemies to be indicted or sought after in some way while being flanked by officials at DOJ.
Yeah, and not only that, but saying, if anything, they've been too soft on his political enemies. I thought that was notable. That's, it comes at a time he was expressly hitting at Adam Schiff there, because he's basically the only person who hasn't been indicted that's on the top of his list, or that, isn't expected to be indicted soon. We're all sort of thinking that there's going to be action in the John Bolton case, which will come soon. And of course, there's case and the James Comey case. So those are the sort of the top four, I think, that he's been arguing. But, notably, obviously, what they're talking about there is targeting an individual. And that's sort of what has been against Justice Department ethics. That's like really core to the Justice Department and what they're you're not supposed to go after the man, you're supposed to go after the crime, right? And so just this entire structure of him of him naming people that he wants to be targeted explicitly and then sort of finding a crime on the back end is sort of upends the entire thesis of the Justice Department.
Well, and part of what I had the vice president on Meet the Press this past weekend, and part of what I pressed him on was the optics. We have now, of course, seen Letitia James indicted, James Comey indicted. Two names on a public post that was meant to be a private message sent to Pam Bondi. And I pressed him on the optics of having directed her to effectively do this. Talk about the optics today of standing there in front of officials at the DOJ and essentially calling for all of his political enemies, naming them by name, to be indicted in some way or held accountable.
I mean, especially some of the controversies that we've seen in Justice Department history seem sort of quaint when you compare them to what's happening, in front of our eyes right now. Because remember, we spent all this time talking about the tarmac back in the day. Remember when Bill Clinton and the Attorney General ran into each other on tarmac and he briefly went into her plane? That became this months-long, years-long controversy because of the idea that Hillary Clinton was under investigation at the time. And now what you have is a scenario where they're openly talking about prosecuting people Donald Trump doesn't like altogether in the just optically. We've seen that at every stage so far, where Pam Bondi does her press conferences at the White House rather than the Justice Department. That sort of separation that we've seen post-Watergate has basically been obliterated.
It's a really important point. Monica, Alba, let me turn to you, because I thought some of the headlines as it relates to foreign policy were significant. Let's start with Venezuela. Again, just to reiterate what I said coming out of the president's remarks, it appeared as though he confirmed that he has authorized the CIA to go into Venezuela. What did you hear?
Yeah, and it's pretty striking anytime you have anybody confirming as sensitive of a potential operation like that. But when you have the President of the United States coming out and saying that, it takes on a whole new meaning. And certainly the president has not been shy about sharing his wishes, desires, and goals when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to going after what he says are these boats that are carrying loads of drugs headed for the United States. But he is now going beyond that and saying that there are these additional, what would be covert operations that he has or had approved when it comes to Venezuela and being on the ground there. Now, he was also asked by a reporter whether he would authorize the CIA to potentially act in support of overthrowing the Maduro regime. And the president said that he wouldn't answer that or speculate on that specifically, that it essentially wouldn't be wise for him to do so. But all of this comes, Kristen, as our colleagues are reporting that there is mounting frustration from some lawmakers because they are demanding answers about these exact strikes that we're talking about. And they say they haven't gotten complete information. They want to see unedited videos, for instance, of some of those strikes that have been partially released on the president's social media platform. But they want a lot more information about what's happening here, the rationale, the decision making, some of the intelligence. And they say simply that they just haven't gotten that yet. So that, I thought, really stood out to me. And then on Gaza, which is the other foreign policy headline here that we're all wondering about, Kristen, it's notable the president continues to say that Hamas needs to disarm, needs to lay down their weapons, and needs to hand over the remains of those hostages that died in Hamas captivity or were taken into Gaza after the October 7th terrorist attack. The president says that this is a very complicated process, as we know, that Hamas has to be going through rubble in some instances, tunnels, some of which have been destroyed, to try to go through that painstaking process. But the president is saying that Hamas needs to do that. Otherwise, there are very significant questions about what will happen next with his own peace plan that he's trying to implement and trying to see. But he is saying that it could be perhaps violent, and that Israel would be the one to disarm Hamas, but that the U.S. could help Israel potentially support them through weapons or other means. But the president was quick to point out he's not implying that any U.S. troops would get involved. He's saying that that would not be what you would see militarily, even though it was CENTCOM today that put out a message publicly urging Hamas to stop doing what it's doing and to continue to focus on the next phases of this 20-point peace. Kristen.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Monica. He said, quote, "We won't need the U.S. military to get Hamas to give up its weapons." It was notable. With the last minute we have left here, Monica, something he touched on. A judge blocked the layoffs that the administration was trying to enact. We didn't hear a whole lot about that during this Q&A with the president, but what can you tell us? What's the status of those sweeping layoffs that had been announced last week?
Yeah, and this is all related to those RIFs, reductions in force, which we know the OMB director, Russ Vought, put into action when the shutdown started, and it did affect so far about 4,000 federal workers in multiple key government agencies. We're talking about HHS, we're talking about the Department of Education, Energy, Interior, Commerce, and others, and beyond that. But now we know through legal action that was very quickly filed, at least a judge for now has halted those, has temporarily blocked those. We know there will likely be an appeal. But what's also significant related to that is that today, Kristen, we heard from the OMB director who said that this is just a snapshot of what they plan for those layoffs for federal workers, and that in the end, as this shutdown continues to stretch on, it could be north of 10,000 federal employees that are ultimately affected by this, though it will likely face more legal challenges.
All right, Monica and Ryan, thanks so much to you both. We really appreciate it. We do want to turn now to another very big story right here in Washington today. The Supreme Court, as it weighs whether or not to gut a major provision of the landmark Voting Rights Act. In a rare move, the High Court reheard arguments in a Louisiana redistricting case over maps the state was required to redraw after being sued under the Voting Rights Act to ensure there were 2 majority black districts. Now, today, the court's conservative majority appeared open to limiting the ability of civil rights groups to challenge state maps under the law. Justice Kavanaugh saying there should be restrictions on the use of race to remedy redistricting violations. Listen.
The issue, as you know, is that this court's cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint.
Now, it comes as a redistricting arms race is playing out all across the country, with 2 Republican states already approving new maps, and California is set to put its redrawn map to voters next month. Meanwhile, nearly a dozen other states are at least considering new maps. The majority of those states Republican-led, as the president has urged his party to create more Republican-leaning seats to try to expand their majority in the House. Democrats have vowed to fight fire with fire by redrawing maps in Democratic strongholds, but states like New York face limits from their own constitution, which prohibits gerrymandering. Joining me now on set is NBC's senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. Also with me is NBC's Jane Timm, who covers election policy and voting rights. Thanks so much to both of you for being here. Lawrence, let me start with you. Really significant day at the High Court. What were your key takeaways?
Well, I think, as you mentioned earlier, the signs are that the Supreme Court is going to take another swipe at the Voting Rights Act. I think we sort of knew that even before. We all sat through 2.5 hours of oral arguments based on the fact that it's a conservative majority that's very skeptical of any kind of race-based remedy. And that's what the Voting Rights Act, as it's been interpreted for a long time, has allowed for states to at least consider race when they're drawing new districts to comply with the Voting Rights Act. What we don't know, though, based on the arguments today, is exactly how the court is going to rule, because they have a whole bunch of different options. Some are more kind of aggressive than others. And Justice Kavanaugh, as we mentioned earlier, is kind of probably the swing vote on this case. And so he certainly seemed open to some version that would mean that this map in Louisiana will probably be struck down. So that's sort of where we are right now ahead of a ruling.
How unusual is it for the Supreme Court to rehear a case? Can you put this into context for us and how this would come about?
Yeah, it is pretty unusual, and this is a sign of the court itself kind of managing its own docket, right? Because usually, you know, the cases come up to the court, the two sides have their arguments, and the court decides whether they want to hear the case, and then they decide the case. But in this one, they actually heard arguments in it already on a different legal question. And then the court itself said, actually, we want to make this case bigger. We want this case to touch upon this bigger issue of whether in seeking to comply with the Voting Rights Act, states might actually be violating the Constitution. And that wasn't an issue in the case originally. And so this is a sign of the justices, the conservative majority, actually kind of reaching out to take up a bigger issue than the parties actually even wanted them to in the first place.
Lawrence, just help folks understand, because 2 years ago, the court backed the Voting Rights Act when it struck down Alabama's map. So what's changed? Why are we hearing this openness now from the justices?
Yeah, this was something that came up during the oral arguments, because the civil rights plaintiffs who are challenging the original map in Louisiana are making that exact point. They're saying, you just decided this issue already 2 years ago. How can you possibly turn your back on it now? And what it is like two key justices, Justice Kavanaugh, as we mentioned, and also the Chief Justice, John Roberts. They were in the majority in that case. But they're both conservatives who are skeptical of race-based remedies. They both signed on to the ruling around that same time that struck down affirmative action in college admissions. And, you know, there's certainly signs that they think they can perhaps vote a different way this time without kind of going against what they voted for a couple of years ago. So we'll see how that plays out.
It's fascinating indeed. Jane, let me turn to you, because, of course, the big question is, how is this going to impact the midterms? How might the outcome of this case impact this broader redistricting battle that I was just talking about?
Kristen, it could take the guardrails off what is already a really unusual and aggressive redistricting arms race, as you called it. You know, we're talking about, say, 12 states that are right now sort of considering or talking about new maps. Add in another 6 or 7. Advocates on the left say that this could be as many as 27 seats could be drawn as safe Republican seats if Section 2 is completely overturned. That's how many seats are sort of at play here. That would be just a dramatic sea change. I mean, you would see, I think, as much as half the country redrawing their congressional maps. This would be just huge, both in terms of remaking the legislature and state legislatures around the country, and just completely changing how, you know, states are represented in Congress.
Well, the scenario that you're laying out is just staggering, Jane. I mean, could this actually backfire, this effort to expand Republican maps?
You know, there's always something called a dummy mander when you do gerrymandering, where if you gerrymander too close to the sun, if you will, you can make a district that you thought would be safe actually competitive. And I will say, historically, around the country, voters don't like gerrymandering. They don't always like the idea of politicians picking the voters that will then elect them potentially. So you could see a backlash if we have an absolutely huge redistricting sea change.
Lawrence, very quickly, before we go here, how quickly, given the enormity of this case, how quickly do you anticipate we'll hear from the Supreme Court? You think it'll be a June decision?
Well, the state of Louisiana has asked the court to decide the case quicker than that. They want a ruling by January, so that, as you just mentioned, like, they could potentially draw a new map. in time for the 2026 midterm elections. And if the court does that, obviously that would open the door to other states doing the same thing. But obviously if the court decides the case a little bit later, closer to June, when the term traditionally ends, that might not give states enough time to do that.
All right, guys. Fantastic conversation and information. Lawrence and Jane, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. We are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There is more news ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.